He looked at me just before the champagne toast and he whispered, "You've made a terrible mistake, Ellie." That was the first time I realized the gift I gave my daughter wasn't a home. It was a cage, and I just handed the key to a snake. That's a heavy note to start on, isn't it? But when a memory is stained with such a stark warning, you can't exactly ease into it with talk of weather or knitting patterns. My name is Eleanor Vance, Ellie to my friends, and I've seen 76 springs come and go. I've learned that life isn't about the grand gestures you make, but the small, quiet battles you win to protect what truly matters. What mattered, more than the air in my lungs, was my Clara, my only girl. She was sunlight captured in a person, brilliant, warm, and perhaps a little too trusting of the long, comfortable shadow that a man like Owen Ashford cast. The grand gesture, the terrible mistake, was the Crestwood Lodge. Clara was marrying Owen, a man whose charm I always felt was a little too polished. Like furniture you bought for looks and not for sitting. Still, Clara loved him. So, for their wedding, I didn't want to just write a check. I wanted to give her a legacy, a place where she could finally rest her sweet, ambitious soul. I found the lodge nestled by Lake Serenity. It wasn't a villa like some of those Mediterranean showpieces. This was a fortress of cedar and stone, built in the 20s, with a wide, columned porch and a roof that looked like the back of a sleeping dragon. Inside, the ceiling soared, and the fireplaces were vast enough to roast a whole deer. It had a private dock, a boathouse, and enough land that you couldn't hear your neighbor cough. I spent 6 months making sure the deed was clean. The garden was established, full of rambling roses and hydrangeas, and every room was painted the calming shades of a perfect sunrise. I handed the heavy, old-fashioned key to Clara on the morning of her wedding day. The look on her face was worth every penny, every tired hour of renovation. It was pure, unadulterated awe. She promised me a lifetime of Sunday dinners and Christmases by that huge stone hearth. And then came the whisper from Owen, right there at the reception, just before the maitre d' poured the bubbling stream of French champagne. I had just complimented him on his family, a group I hadn't spent much time with, being from different coasts, and he leaned in, his smile freezing just around his eyes. "You've made a terrible mistake, Ellie." He didn't elaborate. He just raised his glass, clinked mine, and his cold triumph vanished behind the practiced, loving grin he reserved for Clara. I remember thinking it was an odd joke, a poor attempt at humility. I pushed it away. Old age makes you cautious, and sometimes a little paranoid. I simply smiled back, the kind of steely smile a mother reserves for a new son-in-law she doesn't quite trust, and walked away. But the chill of that whisper was only the beginning of the deep, cold draft that would soon sweep through the Crestwood Lodge. The honeymoon lasted exactly 48 hours. Clara and Owen had taken a quick jaunt up the coast, a small mercy as it turned out. When I drove up the winding dirt path to the lodge on that Tuesday morning, a perfect Indian summer day, the illusion of serenity shattered like glass. The front lawn looked like a staging ground for a small military operation. There were 3 rusted-out SUVs and a U-Haul trailer the size of a whale. And people, so many people. I'm talking about the entire Ashford clan. There was Patricia, Owen's mother, a woman with the posture of a retired general and a face set permanently in an expression of elegant distaste. She was standing on the wraparound porch, pointing at a patch of my beautiful hydrangeas as if they had personally offended her. Then there were Owen's 2 brothers, Kyle and Trent, who had already managed to set up a basketball hoop on the main drive, despite the lack of asphalt, and were lobbing loud, clumsy shots. His sister Dana was sitting in one of Clara's brand-new, expensive wicker chairs on the porch, painting her toenails and flicking the polish residue onto the freshly stained wood floor. And then there was Barnaby. Barnaby was a morbidly obese basset hound that belonged to Kyle, and he was currently draped over the antique chaise longue I had bought for the sunroom. Barnaby wasn't just resting, he was making low, mournful, operatic groans, and he looked at me with the weary entitlement of a deposed monarch. "What in God's name is this, Patricia?" I asked, perhaps more sharply than necessary, but frankly, my heart was already sinking into my sensible mid-heel pumps. Patricia didn't even turn around. Ah, Eleanor, good. The grocery store is rather far, and the boys are already starving. She spoke as if I were a hired chauffeur, not the woman who had just gifted her son a multi-million-dollar property. She finally swiveled, surveying the lodge with a critical eye. We decided to move the family in immediately. Saves on accommodation. Owen said there was more than enough room. Move in? I repeated, the two words tasting like spoiled milk. Owen and Clara aren't even home yet. Well, they have the rest of their lives to be alone, don't they? Patricia sniffed, turning back to the hydrangeas. Besides, Clara will need help settling the house. The poor dear has never managed a property this size. This was the moment. The very first moment I should have taken the key back, called my lawyer, and changed the locks. But I didn't. I just stood there speechless, watching the Ashford clan unpack years of accumulated junk, ugly, beige furniture, plastic storage bins, and, I swear, a taxidermied squirrel, into my daughter's new, perfect home. The quiet, romantic start to married life I had envisioned. It was now a boisterous, dusty, and utterly vulgar takeover. When Clara and Owen returned from their trip, the lodge was already a commune. Owen acted as if this was completely normal. He clapped his brothers on the back, gave his mother a kiss on the cheek, and seemed genuinely thrilled to see the chaos. "It's great, isn't it, babe?" he said to Clara, who stood frozen in the foyer, her lovely tanned face fading to white. "The whole family together, just until Mom and Dad figure out their next lease. A month, maybe 2, tops. 2 months stretched into 6. 6 months turned into 9. The beautiful lodge became a parody of itself. Clara, bless her heart, tried to keep up. She went from glowing newlywed to a perpetually exhausted, apron-wearing housekeeper Kyle and Trent, 2 grown men who claimed to be starting a venture, never ventured farther than the living room couch, where they watched sports at an ear-splitting volume, leaving a topography of crumpled snack bags and empty beer bottles in their wake. Dana, the sister, converted the beautiful upstairs reading nook into a chaotic makeup studio, leaving a dusting of fine, glittery powder everywhere. And Barnaby? Barnaby reigned supreme. He shed on everything, ate his meals directly off the sunroom floor, and whenever Clara tried to put him out, Kyle would materialize instantly, claiming the dog had separation anxiety. The worst offender was Patricia. She didn't cook. She supervised. Clara would be wrestling a massive grocery haul, trying to feed a small nation, and Patricia would stand over her, issuing sharp critiques. "Clara, the veal cutlets must be pounded thinner," or, "Don't you know white vinegar is the only way to clean a proper wooden floor?" I watched my daughter shrink. The vibrant sunlight that was Clara was slowly being eclipsed. Her laughter became thin and forced. When I visited, I'd often find her scrubbing a floor that Patricia had declared unsanitary, while Owen sat smugly at the massive dining table, going over business plans with his lounging brothers. "It's temporary." "Mom," she'd whisper to me, her eyes hollowed out with fatigue. "I just have to be patient. I don't want to cause trouble for Owen." That's when I knew the true danger. It wasn't just the freeloading. It was the psychological conditioning. Owen hadn't just invited his family. He'd weaponized them. He was teaching Clara that her happiness was secondary to his family's comfort, and that her beautiful gift was not for her, but for them to exploit. I tried talking to Owen. "Owen," I said one afternoon, leaning into the formality of his name, "it's been nearly a year. Don't you think your parents deserve their own space?" He gave me the same practiced, too bright smile. "Oh, Ellie, you worry too much. Clara loves taking care of us. She's a natural homemaker, always fussing over people. Besides," he added, glancing toward the kitchen where Clara was frantically mixing industrial amounts of pancake batter, "family has to stick together, doesn't it? Especially when they're all under one roof." The infuriating arrogance of it. The way he used the word family to justify his greed. It was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. Now I'm about to get to the hardest part of the story, the part where a mother had to choose between silence and war. But before I open that drawer of memories, I want to ask you something, just amongst us girls. If this tale of mine makes your blood boil, you tell me. And if you're one of those kind souls who likes to keep up with an old bird like me, well, you know how to find the next chapter. It does my heart good to know I'm not just whispering these things to the kitchen radio. The breaking point didn't come with a grand drama. It came with a scrap of paper. I had dropped by unannounced one Tuesday morning, determined to take Clara out for lunch. The house was quieter than usual. Only Patricia and Barnaby were present. Patricia was on the phone, her voice lowered, but carrying that sharp managerial tone she always used for important matters. Barnaby was sleeping on the priceless vintage Persian rug, drooling onto a small, important-looking folder that had fallen from the coffee table. As I gently nudged the dog off the rug, a surprisingly heavy endeavor, I saw the words stamped on the folder, Lodge Refinancing, Ashford, Arnvance. My blood ran cold. Clara knew nothing about refinancing. I hadn't transferred the deed yet, but Owen must have gotten his hands on the original purchase documents, perhaps thinking that since the gift was to Clara, it was automatically theirs. Refinancing meant taking a massive loan against the house's value, my house's value, and funneling that cash into Owen's ill-defined ventures. He was turning my gift into debt. I quickly snatched the folder and tucked it into my handbag, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against the leather. I drove straight to the office of Martha Sterling, an old friend and the sharpest litigation lawyer south of the Canadian border. Martha isn't just good. She's magnificent. The kind of woman who can make a hostile takeover sound like a polite garden party. I laid out the story, the lodge, the invasion, Clara's decline, and the refinancing folder. Martha listened, her silver hair pulled back in a severe knot, her expression moving from concern to controlled fury. "You are certain, Eleanor," she said, tapping a manicured nail on the desk, "that the deed was never transferred? It is still solely in your name?" "Absolutely," I confirmed. It was going to be the final surprise paperwork after the honeymoon. A big framed copy of the official transfer, I guess. I never got around to the filing office. Martha leaned back, a genuine, terrifying smile spreading across her face. "Eleanor, my dear, sometimes procrastination is a virtue. Owen is trying to secure a loan against an asset he doesn't own. That is not just financial mismanagement. That is outright fraud if he proceeds with the documentation he has." She looked at the folder. "He probably told Clara he needed her signature for house maintenance documents. He's looking to cash out and then walk away, leaving your daughter and your lodge buried in debt." We spent the next week quietly preparing. Martha drafted 3 documents: a notice of immediate termination of occupancy, a cease and desist against Owen for fraudulent loan pursuit, and a legal notice of intent to sell. The last one was the killer. I chose a Friday afternoon for the confrontation, knowing that all the Ashfords would be present for their weekly family movie night, which, of course, Clara prepared all the snacks for. I wore my darkest suit, the one I saved for funerals and hostile negotiations, and drove to the lodge. The scene that greeted me was sickeningly familiar. The air thick with the smell of burnt popcorn, Kyle and Trent wrestling on the sofa, and Clara in the corner, trying to coax Barnaby off the floor with a tiny, tired voice. I stood in the center of the soaring living room, clutching the stiff envelope of legal papers, and cleared my throat, a low, resonant sound that, in that silence, sounded like a starting pistol. Family meeting. Now. The silence that followed was instant and profound. Owen, who was fiddling with the thermostat, turned around, that infuriatingly smug expression fixed on his face. He saw my suit, my posture, and his smile finally blessedly cracked. "Ellie, what is it? We're just about to start the film." "It will wait," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the stale air. "I have some news. As you know, I bought this lodge. It was intended for Clara. Unfortunately, I have observed its use over the past year, and it does not align with my vision for my daughter's happiness." I looked straight at Owen, then Patricia, who had suddenly stood rigid. "What you may not know," I continued, lifting the envelope, "is that in the rush of the wedding, I never transferred the deed. This house, the Crestwood Lodge, is still legally and completely in my name." The gasps were immediate. Kyle stopped mid-wrestle. Trent froze. Patricia's jaw dropped. Owen's face went from pale to a dangerous mottled red. "I have also received documentation regarding an attempt to secure a substantial loan against this property, which constitutes fraud as the property owner was not consulted. "This is the cease and desist, Owen." I tapped the paper. "And this is the notice of termination of occupancy. You all have exactly 7 days to vacate the premises, or the sheriff will assist you." Owen found his voice, a high, panicked squeak beneath his usual baritone. "You can't do this. This is our home." It was a gift. "You're ruining your daughter's marriage." "I am saving my daughter's life," I countered, stepping closer. "The lodge was a gift to Clara, not an ATM for your ventures, and certainly not a communal squat for your entire family. The gift is now revoked. I am officially listing the Crestwood Lodge for sale on Monday morning. Everything must be out by the following Friday. This includes Barnaby and your mother's questionable taxidermy." Clara, who had been leaning against the wall, silent and trembling, suddenly pushed off the plaster. Her eyes met mine. They weren't tired anymore. They were blazing. She was seeing the snake in the nest for the very first time. The next 7 days were a glorious, chaotic revenge. The Ashford clan, stripped of their power and their entitlement, scrambled. Patricia tried to appeal to Clara's sympathy, but Clara, bolstered by my presence and the undeniable legal reality, was a rock. Kyle and Trent had to actually lift heavy things for the first time in a year. I stayed with Clara every day. I didn't help pack. I supervised. I watched as Dana bitterly dumped her glittery makeup into a plastic bag. And I watched as Patricia tried to take one of Clara's crystal vases, only for Clara to firmly take it back. The most satisfying moment came on the final morning. Owen tried one last time to manipulate Clara, begging forgiveness, promising to change. Clara simply handed him a small, sealed envelope. Inside was a note, written on expensive stationery. "The deed to the lodge remains with my mother. You and your family must vacate. I will be filing divorce papers on Monday. I deserve more than burnt popcorn and empty promises." As Owen and his family, including a surprisingly subdued Barnaby, drove away in those rusted SUVs, the Crestwood Lodge settled. The silence was deafening, clean, and utterly peaceful. I looked at Clara, and she looked back at me, finally smiling, a real, genuine, joyful smile. The Crestwood Lodge sold quickly, of course. It was a magnificent property. The proceeds went into a trust fund in Clara's name, ensuring that Owen could never touch a penny. Clara did file for divorce. The lack of a co-owned marital home and Owen's clear pattern of financial deception made the process remarkably clean and fast. I found Clara a new place, a beautiful, small, light-filled apartment in the city, with a cozy balcony perfect for reading and a security system that required a retina scan, or so I joked. It was manageable, secure, and entirely hers. She started taking painting classes, reconnected with old friends, and learned how to cook for one, a welcome change from catering for a clan of human vultures. As for Owen, well, the word got around. Without his comfortable facade and the lodge's equity, his ventures collapsed, and the last I heard, he was living in a dreary, rented room, likely still trying to convince someone to finance his next bad idea. I learned a deep lesson through this entire ordeal. It's not enough to give your child the world. You have to teach them how to fight for it. And sometimes you have to be the silent, steely wall they can rely on while they learn. That feeling of watching my girl drive off to her new life, free of the noise and the lies, was a deeper satisfaction than any grand deed could ever convey. Sometimes, the best gift a mother can give is the courage to take back what was stolen, and the knowledge that she's always got the legal paperwork to prove ownership. If you've stuck with this old bird until the end, I thank you. Have you ever had to step in and save your adult child from a viper they welcomed into their own life? Did you have to play the heavy, or did they find the courage to do it themselves? I'd love to hear your story. It warms this old heart to know I'm not the only mother who's had to trade in a sensible shoe for a battle blazer.